What if every decision you've ever made based on your own wisdom, every problem you've tried to solve with your own intelligence, and every prayer you've prayed asking God to fix what you think is broken has actually been keeping you from the very breakthrough you've been desperately seeking? I know this sounds almost impossible to believe, especially in a world that constantly tells you to trust yourself, believe in yourself, and rely on your own strength. But stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover might completely transform not just how you pray, but how you experience God's presence in every single moment of your life. For most of your spiritual journey, you've probably been operating from a place of self-trust, disguised as faith. You analyze your problems with your own understanding, devise strategies with your own intellect, and then ask God to bless your plans. You wake up each morning mentally calculating how to navigate your challenges, trusting your own assessment of what's right and wrong, what's possible and impossible. Even your prayers reveal this hidden pattern. You tell God what you need, explain to Him how He should fix it, and outline exactly what the solution should look like. Has this ever happened to you? You pray with absolute certainty about what needs to happen, convinced your understanding of the situation is accurate, only to have everything unfold in completely unexpected ways that initially feel like failure. Or perhaps you've spent years trusting your own judgment about a relationship, a career path, or a financial decision, filling journals with prayers, asking God to make your plan work, yet watching it crumble despite your best efforts. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Here's the uncomfortable truth that most spiritual teaching never addresses. The very act of trusting yourself, even in your prayers, creates a subtle but powerful barrier between you and divine wisdom. Every time you approach God with your own analysis of what's wrong and your own prescription for what needs to happen, you're unconsciously declaring, "My understanding is reliable, my assessment is accurate, my solution is correct." You're asking God to serve your perspective rather than surrendering to His. This creates a spiritual paradox that has kept millions trapped in cycles of unanswered prayers and frustrating disconnection. The more intensely you trust your own evaluation of your circumstances, the more you pray from that place of self-reliance, the further you drift from the peace and breakthrough you're seeking. You cry out for clarity while clutching tightly to your own interpretations. You beg for direction while insisting on traveling the path you've already chosen. You ask for transformation while trusting that you know what transformation should look like. What makes this even more challenging is that this pattern feels responsible, even virtuous. Taking charge of your life, being proactive, using the mind God gave you. These seem like positive qualities. And they can be, but only when they're surrendered to something infinitely greater than your limited human perspective. What you're about to discover is what truly changes when you stop trusting yourself completely and learn to trust God only, not as a consultant for your plans, but as the very source of your consciousness itself. The profound shift that happens when you stop trusting yourself reveals something most people never realize. Nothing is actually being withheld from you. Not the healing you've been desperately seeking. Not the financial breakthrough that seems just out of reach. Not the wisdom to navigate your most difficult decisions. Not the peace that eludes you, despite every self-help strategy you've tried. This is the hidden truth that transforms everything. Divine abundance, guidance, and love aren't locked away in some cosmic vault waiting for you to finally pray the right prayer or prove yourself worthy enough to receive them. What's actually happening is far more beautiful and far more accessible than you've been led to believe. Right now, in this very moment, there's a perpetual stream of grace. flowing directly toward you. It never stops. It never diminishes. It doesn't depend on your performance or your understanding. The problem isn't that God is ignoring your requests or testing your faith to see if you're strong enough. The problem is that your consciousness is tuned to the wrong frequency, and this is where trusting yourself instead of God creates the most devastating impact on your spiritual journey. Think about it like this. Imagine there's a radio station broadcasting the most extraordinary music throughout the entire universe, playing continuously without pause. This broadcast has been transmitting since before you were born and will continue long after you're gone. The music is always there, always available, always perfect. Now here's the crucial question that changes everything. Is the issue whether the music exists? No, the music is constant. The real question is whether you're positioned to receive it. If this resonated with you, I'd love for you to subscribe and join this community exploring what it means to stop trusting ourselves and trust God completely. Each video takes us deeper into living from divine intelligence rather than limited human thinking. When your radio is turned off or tuned to static, the broadcast doesn't stop. The music keeps playing. You're simply not aligned to hear it. This is exactly what happens in your spiritual life when you trust your own understanding instead of surrendering completely to divine intelligence. Your mind becomes cluttered with fear-based thinking, anxious calculations about how to solve your problems, desperate mental strategies to control outcomes. You're essentially tuning yourself to static, while the most beautiful guidance, the clearest solutions, the most profound revelations are broadcasting on a completely different frequency. Behind the scenes of your struggle, divine intelligence has been constantly transmitting opportunities, breakthroughs, and answers directly to your consciousness. The broadcast never weakens, but when you're operating from self-trust, analyzing everything through your limited human perspective, trying to figure out life with your own wisdom, you create interference. It's not that you need to make the broadcast stronger or convince God to turn up the volume. You need to stop generating the static that's blocking your reception. This transformation in how you approach your entire existence isn't about trying harder or thinking more positively. It's about recognizing that while you've been exhausting yourself, trying to be the solution, trying to be wise enough, strong enough, strategic enough, there's been a divine broadcast transmitting perfect wisdom that you've been too busy to receive. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because understanding what creates this interference and how to actually tune into divine frequency rather than human static is where the real transformation begins to unfold in ways you can actually experience in your daily decisions and circumstances. Write tuning in the comments if this is starting to resonate with something you've experienced in your own spiritual journey. The transformation that changes everything begins at a very specific moment, and it's probably not what you think. It doesn't start when you finally figure out the right words to pray, or when you develop enough faith to believe harder. It starts the exact moment you stop generating more thoughts about what you need and how to get it. This is the fundamental mindset shift that most people never make because it feels completely counterintuitive to everything you've been taught about taking control of your life. Instead of adding more mental energy to your problems, more strategies to your challenges, more analysis to your circumstances, you do something that feels almost dangerous at first. You surrender those thoughts entirely. You release your grip on trying to orchestrate outcomes with your limited understanding. You allow God to actually be your mind, not just influence it or guide it, but literally become the consciousness through which you perceive, decide, and act. This isn't about creating some new reality that didn't exist before, or manifesting something through sheer force of positive thinking. You're simply removing the obstacles to what has always been flowing in your direction, clearing away the interference of self-trust so divine intelligence can operate through you without resistance. This journey from human thinking to divine intelligence reveals something most people never recognize about why their desperate prayers seem to go unanswered. Behind the scenes of your spiritual struggle, there's an energetic reality operating that your words alone cannot override. When you're stuck in asking mode, constantly petitioning and pleading, pouring out requests from a place of anxiety and fear, your entire being begins vibrating at a very specific frequency. It's the frequency of lack, the frequency of incompleteness. There's an underlying current running through every desperate prayer, every anxious thought about what you don't have, every fearful calculation about your future. That current whispers a message that becomes your energetic signature. I am incomplete. I am broken. I am separate from what I need. And here's the hidden truth about how this impacts your actual experience. This vibration of lack doesn't attract what you're asking for. It actually pushes it away, not because God is punishing you or the universe is being cruel, but because of a fundamental principle that governs all of existence. The universe, reality itself, responds not to the words you speak or even the intentions you hold. It responds to your energetic signature, to the frequency you're broadcasting through your consciousness. When you're vibrating at the frequency of I don't have, when your prayers come from a place of trusting your own assessment that you're lacking something essential, life mirrors that vibration back to you with more experiences that confirm your lack. It's not punishment, it's resonance. You're getting exactly what you're broadcasting, which is why trusting yourself to identify what's wrong and what's missing actually perpetuates the very conditions you're trying to escape. This is where the transformation becomes tangible in ways you can actually observe in your daily life. The moment you stop trusting your own evaluation of your circumstances and surrender completely to God's perspective, your energetic signature shifts from lack to fullness, from separation to union, from desperate asking to peaceful receiving. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because recognizing this pattern intellectually is one thing, but understanding how to actually make this shift in your moment-to-moment experience, especially when facing real challenges that your mind insists require your immediate strategic intervention, is where the practical transformation unfolds. Write, I'm releasing lack in the comments if you're recognizing this vibration in your own prayer life. When you make this shift from trusting yourself to trusting God completely, something profound happens at the core of your being. You begin resonating with an entirely different energy. And this isn't just spiritual theory. It creates real, observable changes in how you experience life. Instead of broadcasting that frequency of lack and incompleteness, you start embodying fullness. There's a quiet confidence that settles into your consciousness, and this is crucial to understand because it's not the ego-driven confidence that comes from believing in your own abilities or trusting your own wisdom. This is something far deeper and far more stable. It's the confidence that emerges from a fundamental recognition that transforms your entire perspective. What God has, I have. What God is, I am. Now, this might sound arrogant at first, like you're claiming to be divine in some grandiose way, but it's actually the opposite. This is the most humble acknowledgement possible because you're finally recognizing that your good, your breakthrough, your wisdom, your peace, none of it comes from your own efforts or your clever thinking. It flows through you as divine expression. You're not the source, you're the channel. And when you stop trusting yourself to be the source and surrender to being the channel, your entire energetic signature shifts from desperation to peace, from anxiety to trust, from controlling to allowing. Behind the scenes of this internal transformation, tangible changes begin manifesting in your external world in ways that are absolutely measurable. Those decisions that have been paralyzing you for weeks or months suddenly become clear. Not because you've analyzed them more thoroughly or gathered more information, but because when your anxious, self-trusting thinking steps aside, divine wisdom flows naturally through your consciousness. You simply know what to do, and the knowing doesn't come with the usual doubts and second-guessing that plague human reasoning. Opportunities that were literally right in front of you, but completely invisible to your cluttered, fearful mind, suddenly appear with perfect clarity. It's not that new doors open, though sometimes they do. More often, you finally perceive the doors that were always there, but your self-focused perspective couldn't recognize. Your awareness expands beyond the narrow tunnel vision that self-trust creates, and you begin seeing possibilities your limited thinking had filtered out. Even your relationships undergo transformation without you forcing anything or manipulating anyone. Strained connections begin healing naturally because the energy you bring into every interaction has fundamentally changed. You're no longer relating from a place of need and desperation, trying to get something from people or control how they perceive you. You're relating from wholeness and peace, and people respond to that shift even when they can't articulate what's different about you. The impact ripples through every conversation, every conflict, every moment of connection. This is what happens when divine wisdom operates through you instead of your own anxious calculations. Solutions emerge that you never would have thought of. Timing aligns in ways that feel miraculous, but are simply the natural flow of divine intelligence, orchestrating circumstances beyond your limited vision. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because understanding these principles is valuable, but seeing how they actually play out in real situations with real people facing crushing challenges reveals dimensions of this truth that theory alone can never capture. Write divine flow in the comments if you're beginning to sense what this shift could mean for the specific challenges you're facing right now. Let me share something with you that might surprise you by its simplicity. The actual practice of shifting from self-trust to God-trust doesn't require elaborate rituals, years of spiritual training, or hours of daily meditation. The transformation can begin with just 10 minutes of your day. That's it. 10 minutes where you stop approaching God like you're placing an order at a restaurant, rattling off your list of needs, and telling Him exactly how to fulfill them based on your own understanding of what should happen. Instead, you sit quietly, release the grip of your own thinking, and you say one simple thing within yourself. I'm now open to receive all that God is giving me. Notice what's happening in that statement. There's no begging, no bargaining, no desperate pleading for specific outcomes that you've decided are necessary. You're not trying to convince God to see things your way or manipulate circumstances to align with your limited perspective. You're simply acknowledging a truth that exists. Whether you recognize it or not, divine supply is already flowing toward you, and you're opening yourself to receive it rather than blocking it with your own agenda. This might seem like a subtle shift, but behind the scenes, it's absolutely revolutionary. You're moving from the exhausting energy of pushing and striving, trying to make things happen through your own effort and understanding, to the natural flow of receiving what's already being given. Think about how the earth receives rain. Does it strain? Does it worry whether the clouds will cooperate? Does it develop complex strategies to force precipitation? No. It simply remains receptive, and when rain falls, it receives. Your lungs don't beg for air or convince oxygen to enter. They breathe naturally, receiving what's already available. Those 10 minutes become sacred space where something profound unfolds. Your anxious human thinking, with all its calculations and fears and desperate problem-solving, steps aside. And in that space, divine intelligence moves through you unobstructed. You're not forcing visualizations of desired outcomes or straining through positive affirmations while secretly doubting they'll work. You're not white-knuckling your way through some mental technique. You're simply being receptive, creating an opening for revelations and intuitive wisdom to emerge naturally, like spring water bubbling up from an underground source that was always there beneath the surface. This is the transformation, from exhausting struggle to effortless grace, from grinding effort to allowing infinite wisdom to think through you. Each day you practice this receptivity, you become more attuned to divine frequency, more sensitive to guidance that's always been broadcasting, more aligned with the flow that is your natural state when self-trust isn't creating interference. The decisions you need to make become clearer, not because you're thinking harder or analyzing more thoroughly, but because you're thinking less from your limited perspective and receiving more from infinite intelligence. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because what I'm about to share demonstrates exactly how this practice plays out when you're facing real challenges. The kind of situations where trusting God instead of yourself feels almost impossible, yet turns out to be precisely what unlocks the breakthrough you couldn't manufacture through your own understanding. Write "I receive" in the comments if you're ready. To explore what this receptive practice looks like in the midst of actual crisis and confusion, let me tell you about Maria, because her journey illustrates exactly what happens when you make this shift from self-trust to complete surrender. For 3 years, she had been desperately praying for financial breakthrough with an intensity that bordered on violence. Every night, she would literally shake her fists at heaven, begging God to fix her mounting debt and dwindling bank account. She trusted her own assessment that she was in crisis, trusted her own analysis of what needed to happen, and poured all that anxious energy into prayers that demanded specific solutions based on her limited understanding. The more desperately she prayed from that place of self-focused fear, the worse her situation became. It was like watching someone try to catch water with clenched fists. The tighter she gripped, the faster everything slipped away. When Maria discovered this practice of receptivity, her first reaction was pure terror. If I stop trying to figure this out myself, if I stop telling God exactly what needs to happen, everything will fall apart completely, she thought. But desperation had brought her to a place where she was willing to try something radically different. She committed to 30 days of practicing what we've been talking about. Twice daily, she would sit in those 10 minutes of receptivity, surrendering her anxious thoughts about money, releasing her own strategies and plans, simply opening herself to receive divine supply without demanding how it should arrive. The first 2 weeks were brutal. Nothing seemed to be happening externally, and internally she felt empty, almost frightened by the silence where her constant mental calculations used to be. But something was shifting beneath the surface that she couldn't yet perceive. Behind the scenes, a profound transformation was taking place in her energy field, in her consciousness, in the way she was, relating to reality itself. By week 3, something remarkable started happening. An unexpected freelance opportunity appeared through an old contact she hadn't heard from in years. A debt she thought was permanent got mysteriously forgiven through a company restructuring. A refund check she'd completely forgotten about arrived in the mail. None of these solutions came from her own thinking or planning. They emerged naturally as she stopped blocking divine flow with her desperate self-trust. Within 6 months, Maria's entire financial reality had transformed, not through her strategizing, but through allowing God to orchestrate solutions her limited consciousness could never have conceived. Then there's David, whose story reveals this same principle operating in the realm of physical healing. For 5 years, he battled a chronic illness that doctors couldn't fully explain or cure. His prayer life had become an exhausting cycle of begging and bargaining, trusting his own desperate assessment that God needed to be convinced to heal him. The turning point came when he surrendered thoughts about his condition entirely. Instead of fighting his symptoms with anxious mental strategies, instead of trusting his own fearful interpretation of every ache and pain, he sat quietly each day, opening himself to receive perfect health as his divine inheritance. Within a year, medical tests showed improvement so significant that doctors used the term spontaneous remission. David had a different name for it: learning to stop trusting himself and let God be his mind. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because these transformations reveal something crucial about how divine intelligence operates when we stop interfering with our limited human perspective and actually allow infinite wisdom to work through circumstances in ways that defy our rational understanding. Write "God orchestrates" in the comments if these stories are resonating with challenges you're currently facing in your own life. Jennifer's story takes this principle into territory that might feel even more challenging: relationships. For years, she had been on her knees with the same desperate prayer: "Please change my husband. Make him understand me. Fix our communication. Transform him into the partner I need." Every single prayer was focused outward, trusting her own judgment about what was wrong with him and asking God to manipulate someone else to match her expectations. She was absolutely convinced her assessment was correct. He was the problem, and if God would just fix him, everything would be fine. What she didn't realize was that this entire approach was reinforcing the very disconnection she was trying to heal. Her self-trust was creating the problem. Every prayer broadcast the same message: "I know what's wrong here. I know what needs to change. I trust my evaluation of this situation." When Jennifer encountered this teaching about receptivity, something inside her resisted. Immediately, "If I stop trying to get God to fix my husband, this marriage will definitely fall apart," she thought. But her current strategy clearly wasn't working. She decided to experiment with something radically different. Instead of trusting her own judgment about what he should be doing differently, instead of trying to control outcomes through prayer, she practiced receiving divine love into her own consciousness. Each morning she would sit quietly, surrendering all her judgments and assessments, opening herself simply to receive God's love without conditions or demands about how her husband needed to change. The transformation started so subtly, she almost didn't notice it. She found herself responding to him differently, less reactive when he said things that used to trigger her, more peaceful in situations that previously sparked conflict, genuinely more loving without forcing it or pretending. Behind the scenes, as she stopped trusting her own understanding and let God be, her mind, instead of operating from her anxious thinking, the entire relationship dynamic began shifting. He started responding differently too, not because she was manipulating him with some spiritual technique, but because the energy she brought into their interactions had fundamentally changed. This is the hidden power of surrender. When you transform your own consciousness, you change the field that everyone around you is responding to. But here's what makes this practice truly revolutionary. In your daily experience, you don't have to wait for those 10 minutes of quiet meditation to practice this shift. Throughout your entire day, in the most mundane moments, you can practice the presence. While you're washing dishes, stuck in traffic, standing in line at the grocery store, waiting for a meeting to start, you can pause for just a second and acknowledge one simple truth: God is here. You're not asking God to show up or begging for divine intervention in your frustration. You're recognizing what's already true, whether you acknowledge it or not. The divine presence isn't somewhere else, waiting for you to summon it with the right prayer formula. It's right here, right now, in this exact moment. These micro moments of acknowledgement become profound resets of your entire consciousness, training your awareness to surrender the controlling thoughts that usually dominate and remain in receptive mode instead. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because understanding how to integrate this awareness into your actual decision-making process, especially when facing challenges that your mind insists require immediate action based on your own assessment, is where this practice moves from concept to lived experience. Write, "God is present" in the comments if you're beginning to sense these moments of divine awareness in your own daily routine. If you've made it this far with me, I want you to know something. You're not here by accident. The fact that you've stayed through this entire exploration tells me you're genuinely ready for this shift in consciousness. You're not just casually browsing spiritual content. You're actively seeking the transformation that comes from surrendering self-trust and letting God be your mind. I create these videos because I truly believe these insights have the power to change lives, not through my words, but through the eternal truths they point toward. If this message resonated with something deep inside you, I'd love for you to join this community of seekers who are learning to move from self-reliance to divine receptivity. Hit that subscribe button so you can continue this journey with us, because each video explores another dimension of what it means to live from divine intelligence rather than limited human thinking. And here's what would mean the world to me. Drop a comment below saying, "This message was meant for me," so I know you were here, that you received this truth, that something shifted in you as we walk through this together. Your presence in this community matters more than you realize. A simple tap on the like button helps this teaching reach others who are searching for exactly what you just discovered. It's a small gesture that creates ripples far beyond what we can see. There's a video right here that goes even deeper into how divine intelligence operates when you completely release control and stop trusting your own understanding. Click on it and let's continue this conversation together. I'll meet you there.
As we come together for this period of inner work, let us set aside every thought of healing as something to be attained or peace as something to be acquired. Let us approach this hour with the recognition that we are not here to get something from God, but to become still enough that we may discern what has been present from the beginning. Spiritual healing is never the act of a human mind working upon a condition. It is the dawning of a higher awareness that reveals the spiritual nature of what already is. And so, before we inquire into principles, before we speak of method, before we attempt to understand the nature of this sacred work, we pause, not to think, not to ask, not to reach outward, but to open ourselves inwardly to the presence that moves upon its own accord. The healing presence is already here. It does not come because we desire it, nor does it depart because we forget it. It is the very life of us, the very soul of us, the very substance out of which our being is formed. And all the discord, the disease, the limitation we seem to encounter arises not from the absence of God, but from our unawareness of this indwelling presence. When this realization begins to dawn, not as a belief, not as a thought, but as a living experience, healing becomes as natural as light dispelling darkness, not by might, not by power, not by human will, but by the recognition of what is eternally true. As we continue, let us understand that no one here is asked to accept any doctrine or embrace any creed. Truth is never imposed. It reveals itself to the receptive heart. My task is not to give you truth, for truth cannot be given. My task is only to lift the veil a little, to bring your attention back to that quiet center within yourself where the activity of God may be felt. When you touch that center, when you abide there even for a moment, you will discover that spiritual healing is not a miracle, nor the result of special powers. It is the natural outworking of realized oneness. So let us begin our study of this sacred subject on that foundation, that there is a presence, invisible yet ever present, silent yet always speaking, still yet eternally active, and it is this presence, and this alone, that heals. Our work is to become still enough to witness it. As we proceed, let us establish a foundation without which spiritual healing cannot be understood, practiced, or demonstrated. Every principle of the infinite way rests upon this one truth. God is the only presence, the only power, the only life, not the greatest power, nor the strongest presence, nor one life among many, but the only. And when this truth is not merely believed but realized, you will find that discord begins to dissolve as mist before the sun. You see, the moment we accept two powers, good and evil, health and disease, abundance and lack, we have stepped out of spiritual reality and into the realm of appearances. It is in this realm of appearances that fear operates, where the mind imagines an opposing force, a second presence that can threaten or defeat the activity of God. Yet, if God truly is infinite, if God truly fills all space, if God truly embodies all law and all life, then there remains no place, no cause, and no substance for anything unlike God to exist. This is not a statement of blind optimism. It is the very nature of spiritual reality. When disease appears, it appears as a condition. When lack appears, it appears as circumstance. But the question before us is not whether these appearances seem real to the senses. The senses will always testify to duality, but whether they stand in the light of spiritual truth. And the spiritual truth is that God, the infinite presence, admits no opposite. If God were ever opposed, even for a moment, God would not be infinite. And so whatever appears as an opposing force exists only as a mental image accepted by the human mind, never as a presence or power in the realm of spirit. Understand this. We do not deny the appearance. We deny it power. There is a vast difference. To deny the appearance would be to resist what the senses reveal, and resistance always strengthens the appearance. But to deny it power, to recognize that it has no spiritual law to support it, no divine substance to sustain it, is to restore your vision to truth. And healing begins there, in the recognition that what God did not create cannot endure, cannot act, and cannot hold you in bondage. In this understanding, fear begins to dissolve. Fear can only exist where you believe there is something apart from God, something capable of operating outside divine law. When fear dissolves, the mind becomes still, and in that stillness, the presence reveals itself. That revelation is healing. Let this be our foundation. One presence, one power, one life, expressing as the truth of all being. When you stand in that realization, you stand on holy ground. For you have acknowledged the allness of God and the nothingness of any supposed opposite. And from this point forward, every aspect of our work will rest upon this single truth. Let us move gently now into a principle that has confused many earnest seekers, yet stands at the center of every spiritual healing that has ever taken place, the nature of what we call error. If you can understand this clearly, not intellectually but spiritually, you will find that the burden of life begins to lift, for you will no longer struggle against the shadows of your own imagination. What is error? It is not a condition, and it is not a power, it is not a force acting upon you, nor is it an entity with will or substance. Error is simply the misperception of reality, the way the human mind interprets the world when it believes itself separate from God. In other words, error is not something out there. It is the absence of spiritual awareness in here. And because it has no spiritual foundation, error has no law, no cause, no continuity, and no actual presence in the realm of God. You may ask, if error has no reality, why does it appear so real? Why does pain hurt? Why does disease frighten? Why does lack seem to bind us? The appearance seems real for one reason only, because the human mind accepts it as real. The senses testify to the world of time, space, and physical form, and the mind, unillumined, believes that testimony. Yet the moment you begin to perceive from spiritual consciousness, the appearance is recognized for what it is, a temporary picture with no spiritual substance to uphold it. And in that moment of recognition, healing begins. We do not battle error. We do not resist it. We do not attempt to destroy it, fix it, or improve it. Any attempt to fight an appearance is an admission that it has power. That which you fight, you acknowledge. That which you fear, you sustain. But that which you recognize as having no spiritual law behind it dissolves of its own nothingness, for error cannot stand where truth is realized. Consider this. If you walk into a darkened room and mistake a rope for a snake, the fear is genuine, the heartbeat quickens, the body reacts, yet the fear has nothing whatsoever to do with the snake, for no snake is present. The fear is based upon a misperception. And the moment the light is turned on, the fear disappears, not because the rope changed, but because your awareness changed. So it is with every discordant appearance. We do not change the appearance. We illumine the consciousness that misperceived it. You are not asked to declare, there is no illness, there is no lack. Such verbal statements do little and sometimes worsen the struggle, for the mind attempts to convince itself of something it does not believe. Instead, you are asked to rest in the understanding that no form of discord has divine support, and therefore, whatever appears as pain, as limitation, as fear, is without true substance. You are asked to behold the appearance without granting it power, and in that very beholding, the truth reveals itself. Once you see that error is nothing more than the unilluminated mind's way of interpreting experience, you will cease fighting shadows and begin abiding in the light. And as the light of realization grows, the shadows recede not by your effort, but by the nature of truth itself. This is the essence of spiritual healing. Not the overcoming of reality, but the dispelling of illusion through the recognition of what eternally is. Let us now turn to the living heart of this work, the silent inner turning that forms the very essence of spiritual practice. If you understand this section, and if you embody it even in small measure, you will possess the key to every healing, every revelation, every moment of peace that the infinite way has ever opened for its students. For all true spiritual unfoldment begins not in thought, not in emotion, not in effort, but in the quiet recognition of an inner presence that is always seeking to reveal itself. When we speak of the turning within, do not imagine an activity of the mind. It is not the mind turning to think a higher thought, nor the emotions turning to feel a spiritual sensation. It is the soul turning its awareness away from the world of appearances and toward the invisible source that animates all being. It is a shift so gentle, so effortless, that many overlook it precisely because it is not dramatic, yet the entire spiritual journey rests upon this very shift. In the beginning, you may find that the mind resists this silence. It wishes to pray in words, to ask for answers, to seek solutions, to outline the condition and the desired outcome. But this is not the way of spiritual healing. God does not respond to our words, nor does the presence alter its nature because we have spoken. The presence is eternally complete. What changes is not God, but our receptivity to God, and receptivity arises only in silence. To turn within is to release, for the moment, every concept of God you have ever held, not to deny them, but to let them rest. Be still and know is not a suggestion. It is an instruction. in how God is known. God is not known by thinking about God. God is known in the space where thinking ceases, even for an instant, and the spiritual ear opens to the activity of the infinite within. This is the listening attitude. This is the inner altitude. This is prayer in its highest form. You may ask, what am I listening for? You are listening for nothing in particular. For the moment you listen for something, the mind has introduced its desires and expectations. You listen simply to be aware of the presence. You listen without attempting to guide the experience. You listen without seeking a message, a sign, or a sensation. You listen because in that listening, the activity of the Christ, the activity of spiritual realization begins to take place. Often nothing seems to happen. But this nothing is not emptiness, it is fullness. In the silence where thought subsides, the Spirit is at work. It may be hidden from the senses, but it is never inactive. Every moment spent in inner stillness is a moment in which consciousness is being prepared to receive truth. And when truth breaks through, it comes not as an answer to a question, but as a recognition. God is here. God is this. God is the life of all creation. And in that recognition, the appearance loses its power. Make this silent turning within a regular part of your day. Not long periods, though you may find in time that long periods are given to you, but frequent moments of pausing, a minute before a conversation, a breath before a decision, 5 seconds between thoughts. These small openings allow the presence to announce itself, and soon you will find that this silence becomes more natural than the noise of the world. This is the heart of the presence practice. The gentle surrender of the personal sense of life and the quiet welcoming of the infinite that lives you, moves you, sustains you. In this stillness, healing is already underway, whether or not you perceive it. For the Christ is revealed only when the mind becomes a transparent instrument for the activity of God. As we continue our contemplation, let us look gently and clearly at how healing actually takes place. And again, we must release every trace of human thought about healing. For the world has taught us that healing is something we accomplish through prayer, through faith, through discipline, through treatment, through mental effort. But none of this is true in spiritual work. Healing is never a human accomplishment. Healing occurs only when the spiritual activity of the presence flows unobstructed through consciousness. You may wonder what obstructs it. Only one thing: the belief that we as separate beings must bring about harmony. The belief that we must think rightly, pray correctly, speak truth, hold faith, or fight against error. Every such effort forms a barrier. For wherever there is personal effort, there is the unspoken conviction that God is not enough, that the presence must be persuaded, activated, or helped. But the infinite does not need our help. It requires only our non-resistance. When the mind becomes still, when the heart releases its pleading, when the emotions settle into quiet receptivity, something remarkable takes place, though often it is so gentle that the senses do not detect it. The presence, which was always here, begins to reveal its own perfection. Not because we sought it, but because we removed the interference that prevented its expression. You see, harmony is the natural state of being. It is not something introduced into us from outside. It is the very nature of the life of God expressing as the life of man. Discord is not an actual condition in consciousness. It is merely the resistance to the divine flow. And when resistance dissolves, even for a moment, harmony is restored spontaneously. Think of it in this way. Light does not need to struggle to enter a room. It does not push, nor strive, nor plead. The moment the shade is drawn aside, the room is filled. The light was always there, it was simply obstructed. In the same way, the presence is always shining, always active, always expressing its perfection. It needs only that the shade of personal sense be lifted. That is why we practice the silence. That is why we cultivate the inner turning, not to get God to act, but to allow God to be revealed. And when the presence is revealed, healing occurs naturally, inevitably, often quietly. Sometimes the outer form changes quickly, sometimes slowly, and sometimes not at all, but inwardly. There is always healing, for healing is the dissolving of fear, the lifting of the veil of separation, the recognition of oneness. When that inner healing is attained, the outer world reflects it to the degree necessary for our spiritual unfoldment. Do not look for results. Do not measure the appearance. Do not watch the body or the bank account or the relationship for signs of change. These are shadows on the wall. Watch instead the inward sense of peace. For when peace comes, healing has already taken place. Whether or not the form has yet adjusted itself, the form will follow. But peace itself is the true evidence of the presence realized. In this way, healing without effort becomes not a mystery but a spiritual law. When personal striving ceases, divine activity appears. And this divine activity is always present, always complete, always perfect. Our part is simply to stand aside to let the Christ reveal itself. Let us turn now to the nature of the practitioner, not the professional healer, not one who has been ordained or certified, but anyone who seeks to bring the light of spiritual awareness into human experience. And what I wish to make unmistakably clear is that the practitioner does not do, the practitioner does not heal, does not correct, does not improve, and does not send forth thoughts or energies. The practitioner simply witnesses the truth that already is, and in that witnessing, the activity of God is allowed to function without obstruction. This is an important principle. The practitioner is not a human being endowed with a special gift. If healing depended upon personal ability, it would be fragile indeed. No, the practitioner is one who has learned to become transparent to the presence, one who has learned to step aside from judgment, from fear, from desire, from personal will. In the degree that the practitioner ceases to assert a selfhood apart from God, the divine activity flows unimpeded, and what we call healing appears. The moment you attempt to change the condition before you, whether your own or another's, you have entered the realm of mental suggestion. You have left the infinite way. You have proclaimed without meaning to that God is not all, and that you must fill in the gap. But spiritual healing does not fill gaps. It reveals that no gap ever existed in the presence of God. So the practitioner looks upon the appearance, the illness, the fear, the discord, and holds no reaction. Not coldness, not indifference, but the deep spiritual understanding that there is no power in the appearance. The practitioner does not deny the appearance. He denies it authority. He acknowledges that the senses may testify to discord, but he also knows that the senses do not testify to the realm of spirit. And so he rests gently in the truth that God is the only life, the only substance, the only presence. The practitioner sits quietly, without words, without effort. He listens, he waits, he becomes receptive, and in that listening, a subtle shift occurs, not in the outer condition, but in consciousness itself. A recognition dawns. All that God is present here. Nothing else has power. That recognition is the treatment. That recognition is the healing. And realize this. The practitioner does not send this realization outward to another person. There is no other. There is only one. Life individualized in infinite form. When the practitioner attains the realization of the one presence, that realization touches whoever has turned to him not because he sent it, but because the one presence is universal, indivisible, and simultaneously present where the appearance is. Therefore, the role of the practitioner is a role of quietness, humility, and non-doing. It is a role of witnessing the spiritual truth that is eternally true, no effort, no manipulation, no influence over mind or body, only the clear, silent awareness that God is the only reality and that nothing unlike God has law, substance, or continuity. When this witnessing becomes natural, when it becomes your reflexive response to discord, then you will discover that healing is not an act but a state of being. And in that state, whoever comes into your presence, whether physically or in thought, is touched by the same invisible grace that supports the universe. That is the role of the practitioner. Not to heal, but to stand still and behold the truth. Now we come to a very practical aspect of our work, though even the word practical must be understood in its spiritual sense. For we are not seeking to improve the human scene, nor are we attempting to make the world more harmonious by human effort. What we are learning is how to carry the consciousness of the presence with us into every moment of the day so that divine harmony may reveal itself wherever we are. Many believe that spiritual realization belongs only to the quiet hours of meditation, that the sense of peace attained in the silence is fragile and easily lost once we step into the activities of daily living. But this need not be so. In fact, the purpose of those periods of stillness is to train the consciousness to make it natural for the mind to turn within, even when the outer world appears busy. Do not think of this practice as something added to your day. It is simply a quiet remembering, a gentle return to the center whenever you notice you have wandered. No condemnation, no discipline, only return. And each return strengthens the habit of spiritual awareness until eventually it becomes your natural way of being. You may find that as you go about your day, opportunities will arise, subtle ones, small ones, in which you feel the pull of fear, irritation, judgment, or anxiety. In these moments, you are not asked to correct the condition, nor to exert control over yourself. You are asked only to pause within, even if for a single breath, and remember, there is only one presence here, and I am resting in it. That simple remembrance, when genuine, dissolves the emotional disturbance. It restores your vision. You begin to see that every encounter, every conversation, every decision becomes a place of practice, not a place of striving, but a place of recognition. You meet a person, and instead of seeing a personality with faults or virtues, you quietly acknowledge the presence expressing in that form. You face a challenge, and instead of reacting with fear, you remember that whatever the senses report is only an appearance, and that behind the appearance stands the unchanging life of God. These quiet moments of recognition, sometimes a second, sometimes a brief inward turning, accumulate. Each one deepens the consciousness of oneness, and as this consciousness deepens, you will notice something remarkable. Outer conditions begin to respond, not because you manipulated them, but because the consciousness through which you perceive them has changed. When you carry the awareness of the presence into your work, you find yourself guided without effort. Ideas come when needed. Solutions arise without strain. When you bring the presence into your relationships, conflicts soften, harmony appears, misunderstandings dissolve. Not because you reasoned your way through them, but because the Christ within you recognized the Christ in the other, and that recognition is transformative. Do not think of this practice as something added to your day. It is simply a quiet remembering, A gentle return to the center whenever you notice you have wandered. No condemnation, no discipline, only return. And each return strengthens the habit of spiritual awareness until eventually it becomes your natural way of being. In time, you will find that the presence goes with you everywhere, not because you carry it, but because you finally realize it was always there. Whether in silence or activity, whether in meditation or conversation, whether alone or among many, the same still, quiet presence lives you. And you begin to move through life, not as a human personality navigating circumstances, but as a transparent instrument through which divine harmony expresses itself. This is how the presence becomes active in daily life, not by effort, but by remembrance, not by changing the world, but by abiding in the one who has already overcome the world. You may find that as you go about your day, opportunities will arise, subtle ones, small ones, in which you feel the pull of fear, irritation, judgment, or anxiety. In these moments, you are not asked to correct the condition, nor to exert control over yourself. You are asked only to pause within, even if for a single breath, and remember, there is only one presence here, and I am resting in it. That simple remembrance, when genuine, dissolves the emotional disturbance, not to create expectation, but to illustrate how naturally harmony appears when consciousness is aligned with truth. When the presence becomes a felt reality, even in small measure, the first transformation is always inner. Before any outward change, there arises a subtle but unmistakable peace, a peace that has no cause, no explanation, and no dependency on conditions. It is simply there, as if it had been waiting patiently for us to notice it. This peace is the evidence of the Christ. It is the first sign that the veil of separation has thinned. Then, without fanfare, one begins to see shifts in experience. I have known individuals who came to this work with great fear, fear of illness, fear of financial insecurity, fear of loneliness. Yet as they began to rest in the silence, as they allowed the presence to reveal itself, that fear gradually dissolved, not because they solved their problems, but because they discovered that they were never meant to live by fear. They found an inner ground, and from that ground the appearances changed of their own accord. There was a woman who once sought help for a physical condition that caused her much distress. She tried affirmations, treatments, and many forms of prayer, but the condition persisted. When she came into the awareness that healing is not the removing of a condition, but the recognition of spiritual wholeness, she stopped pleading and began listening. For a time, nothing seemed to happen. But one morning, she awoke with a profound sense of God is here. That was all. No vision, no sensation, only that inner knowing. Within weeks, the condition had disappeared. Yet she would tell you that the real healing was not the physical change, but the peace that preceded it. Another man carried long-standing resentment towards someone who had wronged him. He struggled, fought internally, and tried to forgive in the way the world teaches forgiveness, declaring that he forgave, though inwardly still wounded. But when he turned within and recognized that there is only one life expressing through infinite form, something shifted. He saw that the person he resented was not a separate self, but an appearance of the same presence he sought to realize within himself. The resentment dissolved not because he tried to forgive, but because he could no longer see anyone to forgive. Shortly after, the relationship healed in ways neither could have orchestrated, and there are those who face financial hardship. They did not use this teaching to attract supply or manifest prosperity. They simply learned to rest in the assurance that God is the source and substance of all being. They relinquished fear, relinquished the belief that supply comes from persons or conditions, and in that trust, opportunities appeared, support unfolded, needs were met, often quietly, gently, without drama. Again, the real miracle was not the supply that came, but the fear that left. These are simple stories, unadorned, because spiritual unfoldment is seldom dramatic. The presence works in silence. It does not shout, it whispers. It does not force, it reveals. And those who stay with the practice long enough find that life becomes harmonious not through effort, but through the natural outpouring of realized truth. When the presence is recognized, even faintly, harmony follows. Not always in the ways the mind expects, and not always in the time frame the world demands, but always in the way most conducive to spiritual growth. For the purpose of this work is not to repair the human scene, but to awaken the divine consciousness that alone is peace. This is the profound revelation that transforms the spiritual path from one of pursuit into one of awakening. And it is here that the entire teaching takes on a new dimension. For when we recognize that the kingdom is consciousness, not geography, we also recognize that we are not separated from it. You cannot be separated from your own consciousness. You cannot be disconnected from what you already are. When the presence is recognized, even faintly, harmony follows. Not always in the ways the mind expects, and not always in the time frame the world demands, but always in the way most conducive to spiritual growth. For the purpose of this work is not to repair the human scene, but to awaken the divine consciousness that alone is peace. Another man carried long-standing resentment towards someone who had wronged him. He struggled, fought internally, and tried to forgive in the way the world teaches forgiveness, declaring that he forgave, though inwardly still wounded. But when he turned within and recognized that there is only one life expressing through infinite form, something shifted. He saw that the person he resented was not a separate self, but an appearance of the same presence he sought to realize within himself. Do not think that you must strive to maintain this consciousness. You cannot hold on to God, and you do not need to. The presence sustains you, you do not sustain it. All that is asked is a willingness to pause throughout the day, to turn within, to allow the Spirit to make itself known. These brief moments of recognition, these quiet openings of the heart, are what deepen your awareness far more than long periods of effort. And so, as you return to your activities, let the silence go with you. Not as an absence of sound, but as an inner stillness, a resting place that is always present, always available, always welcoming you home. You may find that as you continue in this practice, the presence will come to you in unexpected moments, in the midst of work, in conversation, in the simple act of walking across a room. It will make itself known, not because you have sought it, but because you have become receptive. These are simple stories, unadorned, because spiritual unfoldment is seldom dramatic. The presence works in silence. It does not shout, it whispers. It does not force, it reveals. And those who stay with the practice long enough find that life becomes harmonious not through effort, but through the natural outpouring of realized truth. As we part, let us rest for a moment in silence, without words, without seeking, simply aware. Aware that the presence is here, that the presence is always here, and that this presence is the life, the soul, the very being of each one listening. May this awareness go before you. May it enfold you. May it reveal itself in ways that transcend thought. And may you come to know, through your own experience, that God realized is indeed the only healing presence and the only power.
Have you ever stared at the ceiling in the dead of night, desperately praying for guidance, only to feel like your words are evaporating into empty space? What if I told you that the most profound spiritual command in history, "Let there be light," has been completely misunderstood for centuries, and this misinterpretation might be the very reason your prayers feel hollow? When we think of those four powerful words, we typically imagine the physical separation of darkness and illumination. But what if the Creator wasn't talking about physical light at all? What if those words contain a spiritual principle so transformative that once you truly grasp it, everything in your life will fundamentally change? Has this ever happened to you? You've faced a seemingly insurmountable problem, and in your desperation, you've looked upward, asking for divine intervention. You've pleaded, bargained, and promised, yet nothing changed. The heavens remained silent. Your prayers seem to hit an invisible ceiling and bounce right back to you. If you're nodding right now, you're not alone. For decades, spiritual teacher Joel Goldsmith dedicated his life to helping people understand what "let there be light" truly means. He discovered something revolutionary, something that challenges everything most of us have been taught about spirituality and prayer. The profound truth is that we've been seeking light from outside ourselves, believing we exist in darkness, when in reality, the divine light already exists within us. This misunderstanding has led millions of spiritual seekers on an endless wild goose chase, looking externally for what has always been internal. Think about it. If you're constantly asking something outside yourself to illuminate your path, aren't you affirming your own darkness? This fundamental misperception is precisely why so many spiritual journeys feel difficult and produce no real transformation. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover might completely revolutionize your understanding of spirituality. The secret doesn't lie in perfecting your prayer technique or finding the right words to convince God to help you. It lies in a profound shift in consciousness, recognizing that you are not separate from the light you seek. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the globe. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Imagine for a moment what would change if you stopped seeing yourself as a being in darkness, occasionally visited by divine light, and instead recognized yourself as a being of light, temporarily forgetting your true nature. This isn't just semantic wordplay. It's a complete inversion of how most of us approach our relationship with the divine. What you're about to discover through Joel Goldsmith's profound teachings might surprise you, challenge you, and ultimately transform you. We're going to explore why this understanding changes everything, from how you pray to how you face challenges, from how you see yourself to how you perceive the very nature of reality. Now, let's dive into what might be the most important spiritual principle you'll ever encounter, a principle that has remained hidden in plain sight for centuries, waiting for you to discover its transformative power. The profound revelation that Joel Goldsmith brings us is this: true spiritual illumination isn't about creating light where there was darkness. It's about recognizing the divine light that has always existed within you. Think about what this actually means for your spiritual journey. You're not waiting for some external deity to decide you're worthy of illumination. You're simply opening your awareness to what has always been present in your consciousness. This hidden truth completely transforms the foundation of spiritual growth. Most of us have been taught to pursue enlightenment as if it was something we lack, something we must attain through years of discipline, prayer, or meditation. But this mindset of pursuit actually reinforces the very sense of separation it claims to overcome. When I first encountered this teaching, it felt like someone had turned my spiritual world upside down. All those years of seeking, of feeling somehow incomplete or unworthy, dissolved in the face of this simple revelation. The light is already here. It always has been. The only darkness was my own unawareness of this fact. This isn't just a theoretical concept. It's a complete paradigm shift that impacts every aspect of your relationship with the divine. You stop being a beggar, knocking at heaven's door, and become a conscious vessel of infinite light. The transformation is from seeker to receiver, from petitioner to participant in divine reality. Joel Goldsmith's profound insight was that the kingdom of light exists within you, not somewhere in the distant heavens. This perfectly aligns with Jesus' teaching that the kingdom of God is within you, a statement that has been largely misunderstood throughout history. It's not about a future paradise or a distant realm. It's about the divine consciousness that constitutes your true nature right now, in this very moment. The journey from darkness to light isn't about traveling somewhere else or becoming someone different. It's about awakening to who you already are. When your consciousness is properly aligned with this truth, divine light flows naturally through every aspect of your being and experience. Problems don't disappear through divine intervention. They dissolve when seen in the light of spiritual reality. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring what happens in your daily life when you truly embody this understanding. Because while intellectual comprehension is valuable, the real power comes from allowing this revelation to permeate your consciousness and transform how you navigate challenges, make decisions, and experience your relationship with the world around you. If these spiritual insights have touched something deep within you, hit subscribe to join our community of light seekers. Each video explores another facet of timeless wisdom that can transform your everyday experience. The mindset shift from "I need to find the light" to "I am a vehicle for light that already exists" completely revolutionizes your spiritual practice. Instead of desperately grasping for answers outside yourself, you learn to quiet the noise that prevents you from hearing the wisdom that's always speaking within. This is the beginning of true spiritual autonomy. If this perspective is shifting something fundamental in your understanding, write in the comments, "The light is already here." I'd love to know how this ancient teaching is resonating with you. In our modern world, this profound insight leads us to understand that everything you could ever need already exists within your own consciousness. The divine declaration, "Let there be light," wasn't just a cosmic event at the beginning of time. It's an invitation to an inner awakening that happens within you, a shift from seeing limitation to experiencing wholeness. Think about how most people navigate challenges in their daily lives. They operate from a consciousness of darkness, constantly, focusing on what's wrong, what's missing, what hurts. Have you noticed how dwelling on problems seems to make them grow larger, more insurmountable? This isn't just coincidence. When we fixate on lack, we're actually reinforcing and perpetuating the very frequency that created the problem in the first place. It's like trying to remove darkness by analyzing it, studying it, and fighting against it, all while ignoring the simple truth that darkness has no power in the presence of light. The more you wrestle with darkness, the more real it becomes in your experience. This mental blueprint becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that shapes your reality. The revelation that transformed Joel Goldsmith's understanding was that effective spiritual work doesn't begin by engaging with problems on their own level. Instead, it starts by rising above the problem into a higher state of consciousness where light already reveals the solution. This isn't positive thinking or wishful imagination. It's a fundamental shift in perspective that alters your relationship with reality itself. Imagine standing in brilliant sunlight while knowing that shadows have no real substance or power of their own. You don't hope or wish that shadows aren't real. You simply recognize their nature as temporary absences of light, not entities with their own existence. This certainty, this knowing, is the consciousness of true spiritual illumination. The mindset transformation here is subtle but revolutionary. Most spiritual seekers spend years trying to overcome darkness, not realizing that darkness doesn't need to be overcome. It needs to be understood for what it is, simply the absence of recognized light. When you stop fighting against what you don't want and start standing firmly in the truth of what already is, your journey takes on an entirely different quality. I've witnessed this principle at work countless times in my own life. When facing seemingly impossible situations, the breakthrough never came from analyzing the problem more deeply. It came in moments of clarity when I stepped back from the details and aligned with a higher perspective, the perspective where the light was already shining, revealing solutions I couldn't see when my consciousness was entangled with the problem. This journey of consciousness is perhaps the most profound hidden truth of spiritual development. We're not working to create something new or acquire something we lack. We're awakening to the light that has always been our true nature, letting it illuminate every corner of our experience. If you've ever had a moment where a persistent problem suddenly dissolved, not because circumstances changed, but because you saw it differently, type in the comments, "I've experienced this shift." Those moments of clarity are glimpses of what it means to rise from darkness into light consciousness. One of the most profound discoveries Joel made through his years of spiritual practice was that true illumination isn't something we actively pursue. It's something we receive through a form of deep listening. This insight completely reframes our spiritual journey from an active quest to a receptive posture. Think of it like this. When you enter a dark room and flip the light switch, you don't need to coax or convince the light to appear. You simply create the conditions that allow the already present electricity to flow through the circuit and illuminate the space. In the same way, spiritual illumination isn't about convincing divine intelligence to guide you. It's about becoming still enough to perceive the guidance that's already being offered. This subtle shift in mindset transforms our entire approach to spiritual growth. Rather than straining to hear a distant voice, we're clearing away the mental noise that prevents us from hearing what's already speaking. The revelation here is that divine illumination always precedes your awareness of darkness in spiritual reality. The light was already shining on your path before you even recognized you needed guidance. Behind the scenes of our spiritual struggles lies a fundamental misunderstanding about our relationship with the divine. The reason most spiritual practice ultimately fails is because people are seeking from what Joel called the separated self. This is the ego consciousness that believes it is somehow cut off from God's light and must now convince a reluctant deity to illuminate its path. The breakthrough moment comes when you recognize that this consciousness of separation cannot possibly receive divine illumination because it's founded on the fundamental lie of separation itself. God's light is not separate from you, temporarily hidden until you discover the right technique, prayer, or meditation practice. The light is your very nature, your true identity. This revelation exposes the futility of approaching spirituality as a transaction between separate entities. You here, God there, with some kind of negotiation needed to bridge the gap. Joel taught that no amount of spiritual technique can succeed when practiced from this consciousness, because the very premise contradicts spiritual reality. The journey of transformation isn't about becoming something you're not. It's about awakening to what you've always been. When you recognize your oneness with the light, you stop trying to reach across an imaginary chasm and instead rest in the awareness that no separation ever existed except in human thought. I've Witness this principle revolutionize people's spiritual practice. After decades of effort, striving, and disappointment, the simple recognition of oneness with divine light brings a peace and power that no technique could ever produce. It's like someone who has been knocking frantically at a door, suddenly realizing they've been standing inside the house all along. This mindset revolution completely redefines what it means to seek spiritual guidance. Instead of looking for signs, synchronicities, or dramatic interventions, you begin to trust the quiet knowing that emerges from your oneness with divine intelligence. The guidance doesn't come to you from somewhere else. It arises from within the unified field of consciousness that you share with the divine. If you've ever had a moment where guidance seemed to arise from nowhere, not as an external voice, but as an inner knowing that felt both completely natural and surprisingly wise, share in the comments. The light speaks within me. To help make this profound wisdom practical in your daily life, Joel Goldsmith shared a transformational technique he called resting in the Word, or what we might call resting in the light. This practice works as a complement to the understanding we've been exploring, helping to deepen your receptivity to spiritual illumination in tangible ways. When you face what appears as darkness in your life, whether it's a health challenge, financial struggle, or relationship conflict, the natural human response is to struggle against it, to fight, to try to fix what seems broken. But Joel discovered a hidden truth. This struggle actually keeps your consciousness locked in the very darkness you're trying to escape. Ready to continue this journey of spiritual illumination? Subscribe now to access more teachings that reveal the profound truth of who you really are. Your transformation is just beginning. Instead of battling shadows, the practice invites you to select a spiritual truth that addresses the consciousness behind the problem. For example, if you're experiencing lack, you might choose to rest in the truth that divine abundance flows through all creation. If you're facing illness, you might rest in perfect wholeness is the reality of my being. The key insight here is that you don't repeat these statements mechanically like affirmations. You sit with them, you marinate in them, you allow them to permeate your awareness like sunlight warming soil, creating the perfect conditions for growth. This isn't positive thinking. It's a deliberate alignment with spiritual reality that transforms your consciousness from within. The power of this practice comes when you stop trying to make the truth work for you and instead allow yourself to rest in it completely. It's similar to how a musician must surrender to the music rather than forcing it, or how an artist learns to flow with inspiration rather than controlling it. There's a profound alchemy that happens in that surrender. Now, I want to share another revolutionary aspect of Joel's teaching that often goes overlooked but holds tremendous power for transformation. He discovered that most spiritual seeking is intensely personal, focused on my problems, my needs, my darkness. While this seems logical, Joel found that this personal focus actually limits what can be received. Think about it. When your consciousness is contracted around your personal concerns, it's like trying to receive the ocean through a drinking straw. The breakthrough comes through what Joel called impersonal spiritual work, which expands your awareness beyond individual concerns to recognize that divine light illuminates everyone equally. In practice, this means that instead of praying for your healing, you recognize that wholeness is the spiritual truth for all beings everywhere. Instead of seeking your supply, you acknowledge that divine abundance flows through all creation without exception. This shift might seem subtle, but its impact is profound. When you rise into this universal consciousness, you access a dimension of spiritual reality that transcends personal limitations. From that expanded awareness, your individual experience naturally aligns with the greater truth you've recognized. It's like a drop of water that, instead of trying to change its own nature, simply recognizes its oneness with the ocean. This mindset revolution challenges the very foundation of how most people approach spirituality, revealing a path that doesn't require struggle, but rather a progressive awakening to what has always been true. The journey isn't about making something happen, but allowing yourself to perceive what already is. If you've glimpsed how this impersonal approach to spirituality might transform your relationship with challenges in your life, share in the comments. I embrace the universal light. A fascinating obstacle emerges on this spiritual journey that few people recognize. The moment you begin seeking spiritual illumination, your human mind immediately creates mental pictures of how that light should appear, when it should arrive, and what form it should take. These mental images, while natural, actually become barriers to receiving what divine intelligence is providing. Think about it. If you've decided exactly how your spiritual awakening should unfold, you're essentially telling the infinite to fit into your finite box. It's like ordering a specific dish at a restaurant when the universe has prepared an entire feast beyond your imagination. Joel discovered that true receptivity includes releasing your attachment to specific outcomes. This doesn't mean abandoning your intentions or desires. Rather, it means holding them with an open hand instead of a clenched fist. When you present your need for illumination to divine consciousness, learn to step back and remain open to how that light might shine through. The universe has infinite pathways to illuminate your understanding. But if you're demanding one specific manifestation, you close yourself to countless other possibilities. Joel often shared with his students that divine illumination frequently comes in forms we don't expect, through channels we never anticipated. Your mental pictures limit the infinite to your finite imagination. The revolutionary practice is to state your intention for clarity clearly, then silently add, this or something better for the highest good, releasing your grip on how it must happen. Now I want to explore what Joel considered the most advanced practice of all, what he called living by grace. This represents a profound shift from asking God to illuminate your path to recognizing that divine light is already shining in every situation you encounter. You stop trying to generate or attract light and start acknowledging the divine illumination that never ceases. This is the difference between effortful seeking and receptive allowing. Living by grace means moving through your day with the awareness that infinite intelligence is already governing every situation. You don't have to make everything happen through human effort alone. You do your part with wisdom and diligence, but you trust that there's a divine component working through and beyond your efforts. When challenges arise, instead of frantically asking for light to appear in your darkness, you pause and recognize that divine intelligence is already present with wisdom beyond your understanding. The revelation here is that you're not asking for intervention, but for the awareness to perceive the spiritual reality that already contains everything you need. I've witnessed this subtle shift transform people's lives from constant struggle to graceful unfolding. A woman I know who practiced this principle stopped frantically seeking answers before every decision. Instead, she lived in continuous communion with divine intelligence, trusting she would know what to do when action was required. The difference was palpable. Her life flowed with an ease and harmony that no amount of spiritual striving had ever produced. The journey from mental pictures to living by grace represents a profound evolution in consciousness. You're no longer trying to manipulate reality through spiritual techniques. You're allowing yourself to be a clear channel through which divine light naturally expresses. If you've experienced moments where you surrendered your mental pictures and unexpectedly found greater illumination than you could have imagined, share in the comments. Grace exceeds imagination. Of course, the path of spiritual illumination isn't without its challenges. And one of the most common roadblocks people encounter is simple impatience. You practice these principles for a few days or perhaps a couple of weeks, and when dramatic illumination doesn't immediately transform your life, you conclude the teaching doesn't work and return to old patterns. It's at this precise moment that most people abandon the practice, often just before the consciousness shift would have manifested visible results. Joel consistently emphasized that consciousness transformation isn't an overnight phenomenon. This journey isn't about trying a new technique or adopting a trendy spiritual practice. You're essentially undoing years, sometimes decades, of conditioned thinking, deeply ingrained fear patterns, and an entire worldview built on the belief in separation. This mental reprogramming doesn't dissolve in an instant simply because you intellectually grasp a concept. The key insight here is consistency without anxiety about timing. Your daily practice isn't about seeing immediate results, but about cultivating a new foundation of awareness as your natural state of being. The timeline varies dramatically from person to person. Some experience rapid transformation, while others need months of faithful practice before visible changes manifest. Neither timeline reflects your worthiness or the truth of the principle. Trust the process even when physical evidence seems to contradict what you're practicing. The consciousness shift happens first in the invisible realm of awareness, with outer circumstances reorganizing themselves according to your transformed perception. Patience here isn't passive waiting, but active trust in the unfolding of divine timing. Equally challenging is the tendency to forget everything you've learned the moment crisis strikes. You might practice beautifully when life flows smoothly, but when serious trouble hits, a health diagnosis, financial collapse, or relationship breakdown, panic often takes over and you forget your spiritual foundation. Suddenly, the light seems distant and you find yourself back in darkness. What's fascinating is that Joel himself experienced this pattern in his early years of practice. During intense difficulties, the temptation to abandon spiritual principles and resort to human panic was overwhelming. The revelation here isn't that you should never falter. It's that faltering doesn't represent failure. The journey isn't about perfect, uninterrupted awareness, but about how quickly you can return to the light when you notice you've forgotten. The mindset revolution comes when you stop judging yourself for temporary lapses and instead gently guide yourself back to recognizing the light as soon as you notice its apparent absence. This compassionate self-awareness becomes its own practice. Each time you catch yourself reverting to fear-based consciousness and choose to return to light awareness, you strengthen your spiritual muscles. This is why establishing your spiritual foundation during relatively peaceful times matters so deeply. You're building an inner sanctuary that becomes increasingly accessible even during life's inevitable storms. Like a sailor who has practiced navigation in calm waters, you'll find yourself better equipped to maintain your bearings when the seas grow rough. If you've ever noticed how challenges that once would have completely derailed you now only temporarily shake your center, share in the comments, "My light grows stronger through every storm." For those who have established a foundation in these principles, Joel offered a transformative practice that takes spiritual illumination beyond formal meditation sessions and into everyday life. He called it practicing the presence, and it represents a profound integration of spiritual awareness with mundane activities. The breakthrough insight here is that many spiritual seekers create an artificial divide between their spiritual practice and daily living. They meditate in the morning, experience profound states of consciousness, and then step into their day completely disconnected from that awareness. It's like having access to an incredible source of light, but only turning it on during designated times. Joel recommended a revolutionary approach, moment-by-moment awareness of divine light throughout your day. As you wash dishes, drive to work, engage in conversations, or handle routine tasks, practice recognizing the divine light illuminating each of these moments. This isn't about maintaining an otherworldly state while trying to function in the world. It's about recognizing that every activity, no matter how mundane, can be a vehicle for spiritual awareness. This practice gradually bridges the gap between meditation and daily living. The illumination you experience during quiet contemplation begins to permeate your active hours until there's no separation between your spiritual life and your human experience. Your entire existence becomes illuminated by conscious awareness of the divine light that never dims. I've witnessed remarkable transformations in people who commit to this practice. A businessman who had struggled to connect his spiritual insights with his professional life began pausing briefly before meetings to recognize divine intelligence present in the room. Within months, his decision-making improved dramatically, relationships with colleagues deepened, and he found himself navigating complex situations with wisdom that surprised even him. Now, I want to share what Joel considered the ultimate revelation of this spiritual journey, a truth so profound that it transforms everything when fully grasped. The ultimate discovery is not that divine light illuminates your path or guides your decisions. It's that you yourself are the light, not your human personality or limited ego, but the divine consciousness that is your true nature. When Jesus said, "Ye are the light of the world," he wasn't speaking metaphorically or offering poetic encouragement. He was stating a literal truth about your spiritual identity. Everything you've been seeking outside yourself, wisdom, love, abundance, peace, is actually the nature of your own being when recognized spiritually. This recognition doesn't inflate the ego, it dissolves it. The limited sense of self that has been seeking light surrenders to the awareness that it was always an expression of the light it sought. This isn't spiritual theory. It's the practical foundation for a completely transformed experience of life. From this awareness, spiritual illumination isn't something you attain through effort or practice. It becomes your natural state, as effortless as the sun shining. The journey isn't about becoming something you're not. It's about awakening to what you've always been. If you've experienced even a glimpse of this profound truth, that you are not separate from the light, but are the light itself in expression, share in the comments, "I am the light I seek." As we come to the end of our exploration of this profound spiritual truth, I hope you're beginning to see the divine light that has always been at the core of your being. This understanding of "let there be light" isn't just philosophical. It's a practical foundation for experiencing life from an entirely new dimension of awareness. If something within you resonated with these teachings today, if you felt a quiet recognition stir within your consciousness, that's not coincidence. That's the light within you responding to truth. Our journey of spiritual discovery doesn't end here. It's an ongoing awakening that unfolds in beautiful and unexpected ways. I'd love for you to join me on this journey of consciousness. Subscribe to this channel if you're interested in more explorations of these timeless spiritual principles that transform not just your thinking, but your entire experience of life. Each video is designed to illuminate another facet of the spiritual diamond that is your true nature. If this message spoke directly to your heart today, leave a comment saying, "The light is awakening in me, so I know these teachings have found their home." Your engagement helps this wisdom reach others who may be searching for exactly this understanding. And if you found value in our time together, a simple like on this video helps create a ripple effect, allowing these insights to reach those who need them most. It's a small gesture that makes a meaningful difference. There's a video right here that complements today's exploration, diving into how this principle of divine light transforms your relationship with challenges. Click Click and continue with me over there. Each understanding builds upon the last, creating a foundation of spiritual awareness that nothing can shake. Until next time, remember that you are not separate from the light you seek. You are that light in expression, illuminating every path you walk.